Hey, everybody. Hope y'all enjoyed the food. I know I did. And thank you to everybody that brought stuff in. I want to share with you a little bit tonight. As you know, Steve is working on his master's. A lot of it is done virtually, but there are times where he has to actually go to the school and be present there in person. This is one of those weeks where he has to do that. And so he asked me to step in and speak for him. There's a study that I've been doing in preparation for, because I speak every summer here at the church, and so in preparation for that, I've been kind of studying a theme in the Gospels where Jesus gets interrupted. One of the things that is happening in my house right now is Claire, the younger of my two daughters. She is going to culinary school, okay? And it sounds fancy. It's not. So this last Thanksgiving, she cooked everything for Thanksgiving. Yes. That's the good part. I'm going to talk about the bad parts for at least 3 minutes, okay? So what happens is Claire will be in the kitchen working on something, and she's 17, so time management, not one of her skills, and she will ask her mother, my wife, Angie, for some help. And they haven't quite agreed on how much help my wife should give. And it becomes a very interesting discussion. And it very quickly turns into dinner and a show. No, Mom, I want to do it this way. And she's like, well, I'm sorry, I didn't go to food school. And they're just at each other. And they cannot find that spot where they agree on how much my wife should intrude. And as I'm reading through the Gospels about Jesus, I'm looking at those times where he was interrupted. And like he's in the middle of something. Sometimes it's obvious he's on his way somewhere. Sometimes he's talking to somebody. But these people would just kind of come in the middle of him doing something and just interrupt him. And there were times, which is what I find very interesting, there are times where he would commend that person for doing what they did, and there were times where he did not. So let me just read one of these, and this is one of the more minor ones. It's from Matthew 9, and it starts at verse 27. It says this: As Jesus went on from there, 2 blind men followed him, calling out, "Have mercy on us, Son of David." When he, being Jesus, when he had gone indoors, that phrase is important, and we're going to get back to it in a minute. When he had gone indoors, the blind men came to him, and he asked them, "Do you believe that I am able to do this?" He knew what they wanted. He wanted them to be healed. "Yes, Lord," they replied. Then he touched their eyes and said, "According to your faith, let it be done to you." And their sight was restored. Then Jesus warned them sternly, meaning, I'm serious. I mean this. "See that no one knows about this." Which is why he was outside and he waited till he was inside before he healed them. But they, like a couple of jerks, went out and spread the news about him all over the region. I added that one part. He wasn't ready for that information to be broadcast. Okay? It wasn't part of the plan for him to heal somebody. There was kind of an interruption. But according to their faith, he went ahead and he healed them. And so this was kind of an interruption. And this is something that happens in the life of Jesus over and over and over again. Sometimes it was a small interruption, and sometimes it was a big one. Many times, he commended them even though it wasn't just an interruption, it was an intrusion. Pastor Steve spoke about the man. He was speaking to a large crowd. He was inside a house, and 4 men, and one was paralytic or paralyzed, and they tore open the shingles and just lowered Jesus down, or I'm sorry, not Jesus, but lowered the man right down in front of him. while Jesus is talking to people. Imagine for a moment, my daughter walks in through those doors while I'm doing this right now, and just walks up to me and goes, Dad, can you help me open this jar of pickles? And I'm like, yes, okay, fine, I can help you with that. And so I pop it open. I know, ladies alive, you can open your own pickles, all right? I saw your faces. But so, because she has tiny, frail, little doll hands, I open it up for her, and I give it to her, and then she goes on her way. I mean, it was that kind of an interruption. He's in the middle of speaking to these people, and he's engaged. Let me tell you, never here at this church, but there have been times where I've been speaking, I've been doing a sermon, and people have interrupted. It's not fun. And he commended them for what they did. So there were many times where the people were brazen about their pursuit of getting what they needed from Jesus. Is brazen a word that we still use, or am I just old? Do we still, some of the younger ones are just staring at me, kind of funny. Brazen, it means kind of, you do it, and you do it without shame. You're kind of stepping out of line. You're going against the social contract. It's presumptuous. And so that's not what bothered him. In fact, that brazenness is something that Jesus encouraged. There's a story that he tells, a parable about a wicked judge and how a woman goes to his house and bangs on the door and says, I need justice. And that if she continues to do that, eventually, even though he's a wicked judge, he'll hear her case. And he even says in the Sermon on the Mount to seek and to ask. And when you look at the original language, what it's saying is to keep seeking, keep knocking, keep asking. Meaning you do it, and you do it, and you do it. There's another story where he talks about getting food in the middle of the night from a person who's already in bed and he's asleep and he doesn't want to get up. But if you bang on that door long enough, you'll get it. And so he actually encouraged that brazenness, that pursuit, that going after it. What Jesus did not appreciate was when people would interrupt him out of a lack of trust. Many of the people that approached Jesus and then he would commend them, like in this story about the two blind men being healed, he said, according to your faith, this will be done. Meaning you have faith that I can do this. He even asked them, and they said, yes. You have faith that I can do this. You trust me and who I am. It was when that trust wasn't there that he got really ticked off. And there were times where he'd be interrupted out of a lack of faith, a lack of trust. And if there are two people that were on the top of that chart, it was Peter and his own family. Peter was, when he was getting his feet washed, he said, no, Jesus, you can't wash my feet. And then Jesus had to explain, all right, Peter, let me explain this again. When Jesus said that he was going to die, Peter said, surely not. And Jesus said, get behind me, Satan. There was a time where Jesus, he is arrested. He's about to be taken to the cross. And Peter whips out a sword and cuts off an ear. To which Jesus says, what are you doing? Do you not understand that I'm the one that's in control here? And he picks up the ear and just puts it back on the guy's head. His own family, when he was 12 and he was teaching in the synagogue, they were really mad that he had just kind of left the group and gone off to do his own thing. And he said, I'm supposed to be about my Father's business. There's another time where he was speaking to the crowds, and his own family didn't even come to talk to him. They actually sent someone. And they said, yeah, your brothers and sisters are looking for you. And he said, so? This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So there was a time where people would come to Jesus knowing, Jesus, you're the only one who can fix this. You're the only person that can take care of this. Whereas there were times that people would come to him and say, you know what, Jesus, I need to fix you. I need to fix what you're doing. You've gotten kind of, your compass isn't pointing north. And Jesus would always set them straight. And if I had kind of a title to my little devotion here, I think I would call it Honest, Brazen Trust. Honest, brazen trust. All those people that I mentioned, they had times of faith and they had times where they lacked faith. So they were by no means perfect. But we see them as you read the Gospels and you kind of pay attention to their life. You see that they grow over time. In fact, there's a phrase that you'll see in the Gospels where it says, and then their faith was increased. And you'll see that with the disciples all the time. Or they put their faith more to the words, they put their faith in him. And what that means is that their faith was increasing each time you see that phrase. There are times where we don't know what's going on, and we're struggling with something. And the first thing that I want to tell you is that there are times where we have faith, there are times where we don't. Especially if you kind of do a scan of the different areas in your life. It could be that you trust God a great deal when it comes to your job and your family, but when it comes to your finances, it's not so great. Or maybe you trust God when it comes to the future, but maybe not this other area. And one of the things that I think is very important is that when we approach God, understand that he already knows what our faith levels are, just like Jesus did with the people that spoke to him. And that honesty has to come to bear. Whatever the struggle, whatever it is that you're dealing with, and even those times where you're not really sure that God is doing what he should be, where that trust and that faith isn't quite in peak condition. Be honest about that. You know, as you read through the Psalms, over half of the Psalms come from an angle of irritation, confusion, discontent, and sometimes even anger. There's one where the psalmist is speaking out to God and saying, have you fallen asleep? I'm really in trouble here. When you're done with your juice box and your nap, if you could pay attention to what's going on here, I'd really appreciate that. And so they're always very, very honest and a bit brazen. But as you read those exact same Psalms, you'll find that they always end, every one of them, every time, on a note of trust, on a note of faith. God, I don't know entirely what's going on. I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to trust you to see me through this. And sometimes we just have to hold on to that. Sometimes it's just a very thin, like a spider web thread that we're holding on to when it comes to that trust. But if that's where we land, then that's where we land. But we come to him and we're honest. We're honest about our sin. We're honest about our confusion. You know, we tend to, one of the things that I find very interesting is that, you know, we're to have a relationship with God through Christ. And yet we do a lot to compartmentalize that. It'd be like if I told you, yes, I spent 17 minutes with my wife Angie today, and I told her that I loved her 4 times. I'm trying to set a goal of doing it 5 every day, but today I only did 4. But I'm going to make up tomorrow, I'm going to do a 6. We do these little disciplines and these little things where we can kind of compartmentalize our relationship with God. Well, you know, I spent so many minutes in prayer, and I read 2 chapters in the Bible, and we don't really think about the idea of the life outside of our quiet time or those religious activities. You know, if you're asking for an answer from God, if you're going to him in prayer and you're asking for wisdom, you're asking for an answer, you're asking for some kind of direction, a lot of times you're going to get that outside of your quiet time, not in it. I made that mistake for years when I was younger. I would pray and say, all right, God, give me an answer, and just kind of, and wait and squint and listen and, not realizing that, this is kind of an all-day thing. And when we go to God in prayer, we need to be open and we need to be honest. And we also need to be open and honest about some of his word. I'll never forget this. I've only heard it once. And honestly, I don't think there's enough people out there that have the guts to actually suggest this. But she was going through the Bible, and as she was reading through one chapter after another, she was making a note next to the verses that she understood and, believed. Another note next to the ones that she didn't quite understand. And a third note next to the verses that she didn't believe. And let's be honest, you have some. So don't get all religious on me. Some of you are just like, oh, I would never. Yes, you would. And God works all good out of all situations for those who love him. Go to a children's hospital and walk through the cancer ward and tell me that good is just flowing out of every one of those situations. For those of you new, I'm a brutally honest person, so you need to buckle up. It's going to be a rough ride, okay? So God knows where we're at. He knows what we're believing. He knows what we're struggling with. He knows what we're having a hard time with. And I want to encourage you to be brazen in your pursuit of God. Sometimes it may be because you're pursuing a trust that you don't quite have. So many times, we saw that. Jesus would just tell them what they needed to hear, and it just wasn't the answer that they were looking for. But the thing is this, if you take that time to really spend time with God, and by spending time with him, I really do mean growing in that relationship with him. Not just talking to him, but listening. And realizing that just because we may have trouble with something, it's something to do with us, obviously. If we're having trouble understanding it, having trouble putting our trust in it. But that with time, he will make these things clear to us. There are times where I have those days where I struggle too. I'm just like you. Pastor Steve, all the staff here, I don't care who that person is, there are times where they just have that struggle of just putting their faith in God that, yeah, he's got this. He's going to handle it. Because we want an answer. We want God to we want him to give us a nice lengthy explanation along with color pictures, any blueprints that he might have, explain everything. Here's a crystal ball. Here's everything that's going to happen in the future. We want to know all of it. But he doesn't work that way. So there really is this kind of give and take. And it reminds me a lot of just kind of a marriage. And I'll have couples come to my office, and I'll say, you kind of have to understand the intent that each one of you has as she said that thing or you did that thing. And you have to talk to each other about the way that you talk to each other. You have to be open and honest. Those things that are annoying you, they're going to build, and you have to get them out in the open. It's the same thing in your relationship with God. Honest, brazen trust. And try to incorporate that into your prayer time, into that time where you're reading the Bible, but also into that relationship as a whole, where you're letting him speak to you and seeing the things where every now and again, yes, he's going to give you that glimpse. He's going to show you, I do have this. Is he going to provide an answer for every question? No. And I wish I could tell you yes. Every single fiber in my being wishes I could tell you yes. that one day just a note's going to float down. It's going to be addressed to you, and he's going to explain everything. But that's not the case. But there's that time where I have to look back over the course of my life, and I've seen where he's done the intruding, and he's directed my steps, and he's helped me out of certain situations, and he's given me wisdom, and he's helped me along. Yes, he had me then, he has me now, and he's going to have me in the future too.